I'm sure you've probably heard about this or read about this, and some of you probably use it as well, but I just thought I'd go over a few things in regards to this particular sign that I used today morning. So, first and foremost, who was Ernst Trömner? He was a German neurologist. He was the head of neurology at Hamburg in the late 1800s, early 1900s. He was someone who's quite an interesting character if you read about him, but he was interested in a wide variety of neurology, language, speech disorders, very interested in sleep and hypnosis, and he was also very interested in deep tendon reflexes. And he designed something called the Trömner tendon hammer, which is still quite popular on the continent. You can still buy them on Amazon and elsewhere. But typically with a metal, kind of hard metal hammer with a larger head for eliciting the deep tendon reflexes and a smaller hammerhead for eliciting percussion myotonia. Which brings us to the topic of reflexes. I mean, the first medical literature, the first kind of description of the muscle stretch reflex was made simultaneously in 1875 by both Erb and Westphal. And in the 1880s in Queen Square, William Gowers described what he called the myotartic reflex, which is basically the knee reflex, and advocated the use of the side of a stethoscope or actually the fingers to elicit the reflex. But soon afterwards, the first formal, if you can see the slides, the slide 3 tendon hammers there, we can all recognize the Queen Square hammer, which we all use at the bottom of the slide. Could I ask if there are any volunteers to name the tendon hammer on the top left? Does anyone know the name of the tendon hammer on the top left? Any volunteers? Nope. So it's actually the first type of tendon hammer made specifically for neurological purposes. It was introduced in 1888 by a chap called James Madison. It's called the Madison tendon hammer. It's still used a lot in the United States. Has the advantage of being small and carry in a coat pocket. The hammer on the top right is called the Babinski hammer. So that was introduced by Joseph Babinski, of the Babinski reflex in 1912. And it's similar to the Queen Square hammer, but it's got a wooden, sometimes metallic, it's stiff. It's a stiff tendon hammer. The tendon hammer that we call the Queen Square hammer was actually suggested in 1925 by a nurse at Queen Square called Miss Wintel, who I think she cobbled it together using a few different pieces of equipment that she had. Interesting nurse. I believe I'm reading on the internet, her nickname was Electrical Nurse for some reason. I'm not sure why. Now, today morning, Neil and I went and saw a patient ARU, someone who'd come in with a new kind of 2-month history of an acquired stutter, someone in his 50s, mid-50s, has COPD and exacerbation, had come in with both the kind of chest issues, but also the fact that he had lost his ability to speak. Daniel received the call. Neil and I went and saw the patient because we hadn't been code black. We just wanted to try to help as much as we can. So we went across. We saw this chap, and there's a lot of very anxious person going through a lot of trauma in his life currently, and undoubtedly a very large psychosocial functional component to what was going on. When I was examining him, all his reflexes were brisk. Of course, I did the planters, the reflexor. But when I was still in the arms doing the kind of biceps simulators, extremely exaggerated reflexes, a very anxious person. So I proceeded to do this test, which is called the Trömner sign, which is basically a very simple test. You just dorsiflex. You've seen the Hoffmans being used, and probably use the Hoffmans yourself. Just dorsiflex the wrist slightly and tap gently on the kind of palmar wall aspect of either the middle finger or the index finger. And what you're looking for is whether the fingers are all flexing rapidly or exaggeratedly, and the thumb is adducting and flexing at the same time. So it's a bit like the Hoffmans. And when I did it in this gentleman who's extremely hyper reflexes all across, there was no response at all. So when do I use a sign? Often it has to be used in the right context. Again, it can be exaggerated in someone who has a lesion above C5, C6. I often use it in someone who's extremely anxious, with who's very jumpy, who's having very very dramatic reflex, very exaggerated knee and tendon reflexes. I often do it along with the Hoffmans and Rothenbergs. When this is helpful, like any other exaggerated deep tendon reflex, it's helpful when in the right context again, and when it's asymmetrical and very prominent. And that's me.